Good morning, good morning. It's another beautiful Monday morning, and you are back with the Momentum Monday team. Yes, yes, yes. I am on fire, super excited, and I am going to bring to the line, introduce to you a phenomenal woman, someone who is known as a professional coach, role model, mentor, leader, national speaker, vice president of human resources in corporate America, and many others. But she says her most important titles are wife and mom. She has helped me and hundreds of women across the country become better and stronger. She is the host and the visionary of this call. Good morning, Miss Jill Jordan Green. Are you out there?
Good morning, Lynette. How are you doing this morning?
I am doing well. I am honored to be on the line with all the champions. Good morning.
Absolutely. Well, folks, I want to say good morning, and good morning. Welcome to Momentum Mondays. Yes, I'm Jill Green, the host of the call that's designed to wake you up, take you up, and shake you up to new levels in your life, your career, your business, and your dreams. And guess what? We're reaching our dreams in 2016. You're listening this morning to Waging War by CeCe Winans. How appropriate this morning. We are waging war, but in the spirit, ladies and gentlemen. And before we get started today, I want to introduce to you a few of my amazing, amazing co-hosts. I'm super excited. First up on the line, we have Mr. Bishop Dickie Robbins. He's the pastor of Life and Christ Faith Ministries, author of the brand new devotional, Wisdom of the Word, the 90-Day Journey, all the way from Chester, Pennsylvania. Good morning, Bishop.
Good morning, Jill Jordan Green. Good morning, Momentum Monday partners. Let's get ready for a serious discussion. It's life-changing.
Absolutely, Bishop. I couldn't have said it any better than that. We also, from the East Coast, have Michelle Washington. She's a visionary of the Women of More campaign, the author of the new Women of More magazine, all Delaware. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning. You know I wake up like this. I'm intentional about my day every single day. Let's go.
I also want to say good morning to you, Michelle. Also, all the way from my own hometown, Fort Wayne, Indiana, we have Dr. Dawn Rosen in the building, ladies and gentlemen. She's a partner in a major law firm, a writer, a keynote speaker, author of the brand new hottest seller for Amazon, Boss Presence, all the way from Fort Wayne. Good morning, Dawn.
Hey, good morning, Jill. Good morning, team. Hey, Momentum Monday winners. I was created to reign. You were created to reign. Let's learn. Let's grow this morning. Let's do it.
Let's do it, let's do it, let's do it. And again, from my hometown, all the way from the fort, her name is Danita Washington. She's an international girls advocate and youth leader. She's the founder of Girls Rock, founder of the community youth empowerment program for Girls Rock during the summer. Give it up for Miss Danita Washington. Good morning.
Good morning, all Momentum Monday, Leading with Love champions. I'm so excited to be back, and I welcome you all to the call. Let's go.
Absolutely. And last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, you have also joined Momentum Monday. We have folks joining us live on Facebook, so good morning to all of you. Phyllis Fisher, Jill Herman, good morning to you. You've heard her voice already. She welcomes us every single Monday morning. Her name is Lynette Rogers, all the way from Detroit, Michigan. She's the owner of Virtually Yours, the founder of Saving Our Youth, and the author of the #1 best-selling book, Mission Unstoppable, that she penned with George Fraser and Les Brown. Give it up for Lynette Rogers. Good morning, Lynette.
Good morning, Jill, and to all the champions on the line. We're back at it. I'm on fire, and I'm ready to go. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's do it. So, folks, you have joined Momentum Monday. And on this call, we talk about topics that help you gain momentum in your life. We've talked about everything from mental health issues, suicide and depression. We talked about the father wound. We've talked about steps to success. And we're here every single Monday morning to make sure that your Mondays will never be the same. If you want to dialogue with us, you can do it right here on Facebook Live, or you can join our Momentum Monday Facebook discussion group called Momentum Monday Discussion Group. It's a private group. You have to request admission, but once you're in, you can join us, ask questions. But right now, we'd like you to go into the group, #OnTheCall. Please write #I'm on the call so that we can acknowledge you, and you can also do it right here on the Facebook Live. So anyway, folks, we're going to jump right in. We are not afraid on this call to have the tough discussions and tackle the tough issues, and today is no different. Today, we are continuing the discussion that the rest of the nation is having about the tragic police shootings that have happened in the last couple of weeks. The most recent are Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and the gentleman in Minnesota, and then we had the police officers' lives that were taken in Dallas. Our streets are filled with marching, with protests. Our TV screens and our Facebook timelines are filled with gruesome images of men being shot and killed, and sometimes in front of their children. This has impacted all of us in this country, no matter what religion you are, no matter what race you are, no matter what gender you are. In some form or fashion, we have been impacted. And so I was talking to Lynette the other day, and I said, Lynette, I'd like to join the discussion that the nation is having, but I would like to come from a different perspective. I want to talk about how psychologically this is impacting us, how the images and the things that are happening to our people today, and specifically we're talking about the African-American police that are victims of the shootings that have happened. What is this doing to us? And so I began to research the post-traumatic stress syndrome, and I found out that it's just not for folks that have been in battle, who've gone off to fight the war. It's not just for police officers that have been in some tragic incident. It also happens to civilians. So Lynette has a doctor joining us this morning that can help us with the conversation. So Lynette, will you please introduce our special guest this morning?
Absolutely. I am honored and just humbled to introduce to some and present to others Dr. Rose Moten Lang. She is a licensed psychologist, an author, a speaker, a life transformation coach. Her cutting-edge perspective has been featured on television, radio, newsprint articles. She's been featured on the Oprah Winfrey Show. She has had a private practice for over 16 years, and in addition to her own challenging personal experiences, life-changing adversity, and subsequent rebirth, it led her to create Bloom, the 7-step blueprint that promotes self-discovery, personal transformation, and unbridled success. So Dr. Rose artfully blends psychological, metaphysical, and spiritual principles, providing audiences with practical techniques proven to transform even the most challenging circumstances, and we are just so honored that she has, taken up our invitation to really tackle these challenging times. So good morning to my dear friend, Dr. Rose Moten Lang. Good morning, Rose.
Good morning, Lynette. Good morning, Jill, and all the other individuals on the line. It's my pleasure to be here this morning. Absolutely. We're in need of healing and answers and clarity, and I hope I can provide that to your audience within this short time we have together.
Well, Dr. Rose, I want to thank you so much for just being willing to share your time. I know that you've been pulled since this has happened most recently. You are our nation's expert, so thank you for joining us. And we know you're pulled on the radio and different stations are calling you because we're in need of answers, Dr. Rose. And so we wanted to engage you in discussion this morning to talk about, there's a lot to talk about here, so we're going to focus our conversation on the stress disorder and how this is impacting us. So if you don't mind, tell us exactly post-traumatic stress disorder is and how it does impact us as civilians.
Well, post-traumatic stress disorder, first of all, it's a mental health condition that's triggered by a terrifying event. Anything that happens outside of the norm that causes a sense of threat to your well-being is traumatic. And it does not mean that anyone who experiences that is going to experience post-traumatic stress disorder. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. But basically, it's diagnosed as PTSD if past 4 weeks of whenever the trauma has occurred, you are still exhibiting many of the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, there's another type of stress disorder we call acute, ACUTE, stress disorder. Acute stress disorder is something that happens immediately after witnessing a traumatic event, and that's what most of us are experiencing. Okay. However, over time, again, as I said, if individuals after a period of time, are still having intrusive memories, avoiding situations, a negative change in their thinking and mood, changes in their emotional reaction, and there's an intensity of that symptoms. And it's, feeling emotionally numb, which a lot of us was feeling last week, or poor sleep, changes in emotional reaction, being more irritable or angry, outbursts or aggressive behavior. And there's a whole litany of symptoms. But if after 2 to 4 weeks of experiencing a traumatic event, a person is still dealing and struggling with that, and it's impacting their everyday interactions and activities, then that's when we start looking and potentially looking at a diagnosis of PTSD. And I know the word PTSD gets thrown around a lot, and it should, because we need to become more aware of it. But understand that the majority of us, what we're experiencing now is an acute stress disorder. Similar symptoms, same symptoms. It's just we're hoping, the prayer is that they don't persist.
Well, so thank you for the clarity, and that's why you're on as our expert this morning. So acute stress disorder, let's talk about how that shows up. So I'm going to have a moment of transparency with you, Dr. Rose, and my co-host. We actually talked about this last night, and folks, I want to say again, welcome to Momentum Mondays. You've reached us. We're talking live about the acute stress disorder with Dr. Rose, and she's going to take us to school today on this particular issue. So I admit that I was driving my car the other day, and a police car pulled in behind me and began to drive behind me, and I got nervous. I have to admit that. I looked in my rearview mirror. I began to say, okay, where is my registration? Where is my proof of insurance? And now, Dr. Rose, I always have that stuff with me. I always have it in its proper place, but I was nervous. I have to admit that yesterday I found myself in a restaurant environment, and my family and I were the minority, and I was very aware that we were very few people of color. I was very aware of where my brown son was at all times. I was nervous and I was concerned, and I want you to talk to the nation today, because after today, this conversation will be replayed over and over, and a lot of us are feeling things and we don't know why. We're angry, right, because of what happened. But can you talk to us about how this acute stress disorder shows up in us as civilians who were not specifically involved in the incident, but yet we're feeling things?
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean we have to be there in the face of the trauma to experience the trauma. If we go back to 9/11, for example, the majority of the country, mass majority of the country, were not in the New York area, did not witness what occurred and the devastating aftermath of that. But all of the nation, most of the world experienced the trauma of it. And we had the effects, as you were describing, driving in the car and feeling nervous with the police officer driving behind you. What you experience is the physiological reactions to trauma. Okay. When you talk about nervousness, it activated your, what we call your your sympathetic nervous system. So you became on alert. It's that alert when you, again, as I mentioned, when you are facing something that you perceive as a threat to your well-being, our physiological system activates, and that's the feelings of nervousness, sometimes a dry mouth, the shaking hands, the sweaty palms, because at that point, what our mind has told our body is to be on alert and be ready to fight or flee or protect yourself.
Yes. Okay.
And it's deep that seeing a police officer in your rearview mirror is not supposed to elicit that type of response. However, we live in a nation where we as Black individuals have been conditioned to react that way. It's an automatic thing. You didn't tell your body to tense up. You didn't tell your body to get nervous. It has created an automatic pathway in your brain, almost like instinct and reflex, to do that because of what we've been seeing in recent, I don't even want to say recent years, what we've been experiencing, unfortunately, for 400 plus years.
Wow. So, folks, thank you for joining Momentum Monday. We have Dr. Rose on the line. We're talking about acute stress disorders. I have it listed as the post-traumatic stress disorder. And
that's fine, because that's more well-known. So I don't want you even changing that. I just want to educate as a psychologist, we know that there's a difference. But to keep the conversation going, I would not want to confuse people. So we'll keep calling it PTSD if that's fine with you guys.
Okay, awesome. That's fine. And so I love that you said that that there's this response that goes off, right? So I described, for those of you just joining us, that I felt nervous when a police officer pulled in behind me. I wasn't doing anything wrong, but the sympathetic nervous system activated, right? And it made me nervous. And I did start to sweat a little bit. And so we also have our co-host on the line, and Lynette has a question she wants to ask you, Dr. Rose.
Okay. Well, I wanted to discuss because those feelings naturally are elicited, the feelings of stress, the feelings of anger, especially with the imagery. The fact that we have our social media, Facebook Live, it's a blessing and a curse, so to speak. So we're able to witness some of these tragedies live, just like the tragic incident in Minnesota. But then I think back, just like how you said, years ago, they used to, come from near and far to witness the lynching. And I'm just thinking, I remember you discussed a while ago the collective unconsciousness, and if you can kind of speak to that and how these images are eliciting fear, anger, but it sends a signal to me genetically when I see these images. If you can kind of speak to that, it would be very helpful.
Yes. So there is, and I talk about this piece. Those of you who are on the line, I have a YouTube channel. You can just search Rose Moten, Dr. Rose Moten, and there's a piece I do on the genetic effects of superiority and racism in this country. And I talk about the collective unconscious, which is a piece that I penned probably over a decade ago. It was just, some insight, a flash of insight that was given to me, looking at the fact, as you mentioned, Lynette, that there is an unconscious there's a collective unconsciousness that we experience as a people. And what is meant by that? So when we talk about trauma and witnessing things, traumas often, like these traumas we saw with Philando Castile and the gentleman in Louisiana, Sterling, they did, even though we did not experience that personally, we weren't there in their presence, it triggers within us, or I should say awakens within us, past traumas that we may have not dealt with. It triggers within us the past traumas of the long list of names of individuals who we've seen been victimized by police officers in recent years. It triggers within us past traumas that we, and this is where we get into the collective unconscious, that we may not have even personally experienced in our lifetime. When you talk about 400 years of oppression, 400 years of systematic racism and discrimination, 400 years of being considered less than, 400 years of having to just constantly be in this fight, flight, or flee or freeze syndrome, it has affected us as a people genetically. There's been tons of studies that have been done about the genetic effects of individuals who experienced the Holocaust. They looked at their offspring and they found that there were epigenetic changes in their DNA, in their genetic makeup, that they made them more susceptible to anxiety and stress. And again, as you mentioned, Jill, like having something as benign as a police officer drive by trigger this response in a person. They looked at the survivors of Holocaust victims and found that definitely the experience of the Holocaust that their ancestors, their grandparents, great-grandparents, many of whom they never met, experienced affected the expression of their genetic makeup. Now, if you look at that study, think about, now, not to downplay the Holocaust because it was a tragedy, but it was a fraction of the time of 400 years, 4 decades, centuries of oppression and torture, that was done. So if you look at that, there's no doubt in my mind that it has affected our genetic makeup as well. And so for many of us, and this is what a lot of people don't understand, for many of us, when we view images of Philando Castile or Sterling in Louisiana, it goes to the core of our being It goes to our psyche. It goes to this collective unconscious of traumas that were experienced by our ancestors, and it awakens that collective pain. And that's what we experienced as a nation last week.
So, Dr. Rose, I'm going to stop you for a second, folks. I want to say welcome to Momentum Monday. We have a lot of folks that are joining us live on Facebook Live. Sherry Armstrong, Chris Dowse, Jill Herman, Jamal Jackson, thank you so much for joining us. Felicia Shepard, Monica Brickley. This is amazing what you just shared, Dr. Rose. You are telling us that there is a genetic effect from, years and years and years ago that will cause us to be prone to this acute stress disorder. And in that disorder, it creates the symptoms of the fight, flight, or flee. This is
fight,
amazing.
Flight, or freeze. Yep, freeze or freeze.
Or freeze. Fight,
yes.
Flight, or freeze. Okay, and so what I want to say to the folks that are just joining us, we are having a discussion about what's happening across the nation, but from a different perspective. We all have been impacted by this. I have some white callers on the line right now and black callers on the line right now. People inboxing me saying, I'm experiencing those same things, right? And some of them are not black. However, it is a reality that we are being impacted by the tragedies we are seeing on TV. So we've invited Dr. Rose on to help us with this. So we're talking about how it shows up. I gave an example of what I felt like when a police car was behind me. I didn't even get pulled over. We do have co-hosts on the line who have a question. So Bishop Robbins has a question for you, Dr. Rose.
Yeah, Dr. Rose, you guys may be aware of the fact that there was yet another shooting in Mobile, Alabama 2 nights ago. A young man was pulled over in what should have been a routine traffic stop. And a witness in the neighborhood observed it. The young man was asked to get out of the car, and immediately he was shot one time, fell to the ground, and he was shot 3 other times. The neighbors witnessed that. So naturally, they're going to have acute traumatic stress issues there. Now, Mobile happened to be my birthplace. I was there a week and a half ago, literally blocks away from where this tragedy occurred. And what it did was it started to bring back memories of some of the racist treatment that I experienced when I actually was in Alabama. This is well over 40 years ago. And then fast forwarding, of course, things have caused me to revisit that. And now, as a black male, I often have police cars pull in behind me.
Yes.
And there are all kinds of involuntary responses. Now, here's my concern. When this happened to young black men and they get nervous, the perception by the officer could be that they're hiding something or that's suspicious behavior, which exacerbates the whole issue and could cause things to escalate. In other words, we have cause and response there that could cause the situation to escalate. Now, what can you advise people to do to de-escalate their responses so that they don't create a situation where there is a confrontation?
And a great question. First of all, it's so sad that we have to discuss this, that we have to discuss how we de-escalate, because I can give some tips and I can give some pointers, but it does not mean that it's going to have a different outcome. It's going to hopefully increase the likelihood. When we see with Philando Castile, he did everything correctly, from what's being reported. He announced that he was a legally carrying citizen. It sounds like they both had their hands up. But what I would, to really help temper this physiological response that we already have that makes us nervous, I would suggest taking some deep breaths, prior to the officer coming to the car to just help calm you physiologically. That will, I know it sounds simple and it sounds very benign, but taking a few very deep breaths will help to calm that sympathetic nervous system down a little bit, so you will think more clearly. You'll be more able to relate with the officer. And from a physiological standpoint, that's pretty much all you can do, and just follow the officer's directives. But we know that that's been done, Yeah. I wish I could give you guys something more concrete that could say, if you do this, if you do A, B, and C, then we won't have the effects of D, E, and F. But that's not the reality that we live in. That's not the reality that we live in. But to help calm that temper, because I think most of us have experienced that. You know, if you are a black individual, especially a black male in this society with a police officer stopping you, it escalates just the nervousness, the intensity, even the anger and rage. Now, I don't want to even, let's talk about that, because this is another suggestion I can give you. I understand, and I totally have compassion for the fact that for our black men in society and our black women, you know, because we saw what happened to Sandra Bland. But we know that there's a sense of just injustice and anger when you know you are being stopped for something very benign, when you are being accosted for something that you shouldn't be. Someone brought up a good point. You know, why was the officer even on Philando Castell's side of the car if he was stopping that car for a busted taillight? That is the driver's responsibility. That is not the passenger's responsibility. He should have approached the driver, who was a female. However, as is suspected, he saw a black male in the car, and he saw an opportunity for some confrontation. Because immediately for many of these officers, they see a black male as a threat, as danger, as someone that they need to annihilate and be on guard with. So one of the things, to answer one of your questions, Bishop, would be to, as much as possible, try to temper the anger that I know is boiling within you. Try to temper that sense of injustice that you know it likely is while you're being stopped, and take your ticket if you have to take your ticket. You know, go to court, fight it, because we would rather see you alive another day and maybe even a few $100s out of your pocket than to see you as a hashtag. But I would say just understand that the physiological responses you are having when this happens is normal, it's understandable, and it's natural. It's your body's way of protecting you. But use just some rational sense at that time and tell yourself, this is not the time or place to be angry. This is not the time or place to debate with this officer. You know, you want to go home to your family.
And so, Dr. Rose, thank you for sharing that. And I think we will have a part two to this call. We will invite, somebody from law enforcement or an expert who can share with us, really, what are some things that we can do in those moments. So we will address the what you can do if there is an interaction with a law officer or a stop. Today we'll continue to focus on, because there are some folks sitting on the couch right now looking at CNN, watching, like Bishop said, the fact that there was another shooting and feeling something. We have more men on the call today than we normally have. We have more men on today's call than we normally have. Why? Because people are feeling something. And so today's discussion, Dr. Rose, and I'm so glad you joined us, is about what are we feeling, first of all, other than anger? And you said it's natural that we're feeling this way, right? This acute stress disorder, there's a name for a reason. It's been triggered by tragic incidents that we've all been a witness to from our living room. And so today we have men walking into work feeling something, right?
Yes.
And so now what do you do with those feelings? And before you answer that, Dr. Rose, I'm going to ask Dawn to share with us. Dawn, if you're comfortable sharing a little bit about what you've been feeling and how these tragedies have impacted you. I want you to share your story about the resentment.
Yeah. I mean, Dr. Rose, I'm so glad you're here. I've just been listening. This is powerful and necessary. So thank you. We were talking about this and just, the varying ways this has impacted us. And I certainly have some of the same. I'm raising two young boys, so certainly some of the same things that Jill remarked about, just being mindful of where are they when we're in a restaurant or those sorts of things. But, this happened, I'm losing track of days now. So this happened, I think, I know like Wednesday and Thursday, I believe. And so coming to work Friday was interesting because when you work in a majority environment, I think everybody on this call is accustomed to that at one point, if not right now. You work in a majority environment where there are very few like you. You are, this is not a shocker. We are called upon to be, I don't even know if trilingual is the right word, but we're multifaceted. I'll try that word, right? We have to be a lot of things to make sure that people are comfortable with us. As opposed to the other way around. And so I think, and I shared this, that, one of the things that impacts us, and I'd love your thoughts on just how to manage that. One of the things that impacted me particularly was watching Philando Castile's fiance, because I saw just a remarkable strength in her and wisdom, because I think she very much so understood that she was about to be shot too if she did not downplay herself, big time. It reminded me a lot of the things we grew up certainly watching, and the things that my mother has told me about her experience in Selma, Alabama, and Sprott, Alabama, about answering questions, not looking someone in the eye, or having to step off the sidewalk because a white person was walking by, or things like that. That's what I got all bottled up in that short video of her answering this officer, yes, sir, and I won't do this, sir, and of course, sir, while he's got a gun at her. And so I translate that to a non-lethal environment, if you will, like coming to work, right, doing normal tasks. And I found myself incredibly resentful of my counterpart's privilege, because there was only one of my colleagues who saw me, if you know what I mean, not literally, a lot saw me, but saw me enough to and cared enough to say, I understand today is different for you. And, and so it impacted me a great deal, because I was very resentful of the fact that I was trying to figure out how to say things to my kids and find my footing from my spiritual perspective to line myself back up with my father and all those sorts of things. I was struggling, and still am to a certain extent. Notwithstanding, and I don't downplay my faith. It's just that it is what it's very real and big. But I just, those sorts of things where you're coming in these environments, not a police stop, no danger to be reported per se, but all of the years of coming in being different, working different, being responsible for the same requirements from a work perspective, yet carrying a very, very different load than your counterparts. And this is not victimization, it's just real. And it all came to a head behind these incidents, probably more so than ever. And I think it's because the videos are getting much more graphic, and they're hard to deny anymore, right? And so I just wonder what you do when it's not about a police stop. It's about I'm not functioning in these environments is getting much more difficult, because you're quieted to a certain extent to keep your job, to do whatever, but it's difficult.
Yes, it's very difficult. You bring up a great point. Again, last week we were in pain as a people, and I don't want to just say it was people of color, because some of our non-color and white counterparts felt the pain as well, but a lot of people didn't. Someone shared something on Twitter, and it was actually a white man that shared it. He was like, I'm looking at today's timeline. He says, all the my black friends are grieving collectively, and my white friends are showing pictures of what they're having for lunch, and just really everyday pictures or what have you. I had a friend, a colleague of mine, and she's a psychologist, and she mentioned how, I think it was Thursday, she went to the grocery store to purchase some perch. And there was a white woman that came up to her and made the comment of, I haven't had perch since I was a little girl. How are you going to cook that? And she said it triggered something in her that she had to contain herself, because she said in her mind at that time, she felt as though she was being minimized, and I'm going to tell you what her words are, I'm not your house nanny to give you a recipe. I mean, and she said she didn't know where that came from. But again, this is that collective, going back to the core of this unconscious, this archetype of just being considered inferior that we all walk around with. And that's difficult. So when things like that happen, we have to understand, take a moment and say, you know what? Recognize and acknowledge that it's happening. Don't try to suppress it, but don't act on it as well. And in those moments, sometimes you just need a timeout. On Friday, I took a timeout. I was supposed to go and do paperwork. It was my paperwork day at the office. And I did, as my girlfriend who decided to spend the day with me said, we did a full day of nothing, because it was like I was depleted. a colleague who's a psychologist. She says, we're trained to deal with this. She said, and I'm having a difficult time. And you can imagine individuals who don't understand, like I said, the physiological effects of what's going on, the emotional effects of what's going on, how we're all dealing with it as a nation. So to answer your question or just a comment, because I don't know if there's a specific answer to it, is that everything you described is normal. Those normal things of the boss coming over on a Friday to where you have to comply to something that you may not want to comply with is going to trigger a sense of resentment within you. And know that this is normal. Know where it's coming from. Acknowledge it. And this is where we get into what can we do to heal ourselves, to heal this country, to stop this from happening. So often. It's going to take a collective effort.
Yes, Dr. Rose, I'm so glad you're here this morning. I'm so glad you're here. And, Dawn, I'm so glad you shared that. We have people that are continuing to join us via Facebook Live. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Momentum Mondays. We are here live. We are discussing post-traumatic stress disorder and how psychologically we are impacted by what we are witnessing. We've all been witnesses to these tragedies, and right now we're specifically talking about the police shootings that happened with Mr. Alton Sterling out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and Philando Castile out of Minnesota, and there was another one just in Mobile. Look, each day that we talk about it, there'll be, unfortunately, another name to add, but specifically for this conversation, we're talking about how we're impacted, and Dawn just shared something, and I'm glad she shared it because it reminded me. See, I think, Dr. Rose, a lot of us are walking around feeling things, but we're suppressing it, and we're just saying we're angry, but she called out. She was a little resentful of the privilege that some others in her office had, right? And told her that I honestly had that experience in a restaurant the other day with my family. We were having the discussion. I have a young son. For those of you who are not on Facebook Live, I'm an African-American woman, in case you didn't know. My son is African-American, along with my husband and my daughter. And we were having the discussion. And he's 10, Dr. Rose.
Yeah.
And I got choked up and emotional because I had to talk to him about what happens and what he should do if he ever finds himself in an incident or face-to-face with a police officer. He's 10.
Yeah.
But I had to have the conversation. And so now we're talking about how we're impacted, but our children, Dr. Rose, right, have a different impact. But as I'm sitting there with my husband, we're having this discussion. Behind us is a family, right, a white family, and on the other side is a white family. And they're having dinner just like us. But I can't tell you that in my heart, I begin to say, they don't have to have this conversation. I thought that, but I didn't remember I thought that until I heard Dawn voicing her feelings. So it's important today that we're having a conversation that, A, we first have to acknowledge we're having these feelings. And I felt guilty for feeling that, and I don't know why. But, Dr. Rose, I want you to begin to talk about, how this is impacting our kids, and then what can we do with our feelings. But before that, Danita Washington has a comment or a question. Danita?
Yeah, I've been listening. Welcome, Dr. Rose. I'm excited that you're on the call and bringing this to light for us. The one thing for me that I wanted to, talk about was the fact that learning how to replace fear with faith, because I think we've allowed the enemy to kind of take hold of, our thoughts, our feelings, and how we perceive and see things. And, for me, I've even kind of not watched so much of it the last 48 hours because it had taken a toll on my feelings and, how I was interacting, not just with white people, with even, just fear. And I wanted to take back some control of my mindset. And so one of the things that, I've been talking to people about, just in my circles, is that whole thing of fear, because really when I look at it and how even things happen, the officer may have been feeling some fear, but also the people in the car, it was very evident that they were. And I really liked the strength of the woman in the car. That was the one thing that I saw that I thought, wow, this woman's strength, the way that she stayed calm and everything throughout the whole entire event. But, again, everybody I talk to, I just keep hearing that F word, fear. And so for today, just maybe talking to us and reminding us to take that fear and replace it with faith going forward today. We know that this probably won't be the last incident. There may be some others, and maybe minimizing. Does that help us in minimizing watching it? Because it is so prevalent everywhere we go. Like you say, you turn on your Facebook and it just pops up. But minimizing it may help us in navigating these emotions that we're feeling, because I just sense that a lot of people are so overwhelmed with it. And that, like you said, if they're not conscious, they don't know what to do with it. A lot of us on the call, we have a faith base, we have some things to go to, but imagine the thousands and thousands of people who do not have that word, that faith base to go to. Those are the ridiculous posts that we're seeing of people yelling, screaming, cussing, you know what I mean, not knowing what to do with all of that emotion.
Yes. So, first of all, minimize your exposure to it. But, and I'm one, as a psychologist, I tell my patients all the time not to watch the news, not to watch the news, because the news can exacerbate depression, anxiety, and all those symptoms. But at the same time, we cannot just bury our head in the sand of what's going on. Absolutely. And we need to be informed. So I'm torn here. I'll be honest with you guys. I'm torn because this is like I can understand both sides. But we know what happened. We don't have to keep watching this video over and over again, because prolonged exposure to a traumatic event or repeated exposure is going to increase your symptoms that you're having. You've seen the video once. You don't need to see it again. Even limit the conversations you continue to have. So if you want to feel some sense of power with that, what I suggest you doing is transforming that fear into action. So you mentioned about faith. People need to have more faith, and I totally agree with that. But at the same time, there's a lot of faithful people already out here, and this continues to happen. So faith is important, so I don't want you to think I'm minimizing that. But we have to transform that energy of fear into action, and action unlike what we've probably been accustomed to doing it. Now, I was downtown with my sons, or my niece, my nephew, my sister, my brothers, my sister-in-law last Friday. I was down there demonstrating and marching downtown. What does that do? If nothing else, it gave me a sense of just collective unity. And for me, coming out off of the week that we came off of, that was important. That was needed. It may not have changed one law. It may have, because I hear people say, "Oh, we've marched and we've protested." That doesn't do anything, and maybe that doesn't do anything on the judicial level. But I'll tell you, it did something for me on a personal level.
Yeah.
It did something for me, and I felt like I took some type of action to ward off this sense of helplessness that usually comes with these type of situations, like there's nothing you can do. But when we talk about action, we have to realize, and I don't know if there's another question before I get into what I feel we can do on an individual basis to just really help heal this world.
Yes. We do. Folks, welcome to Momentum Monday. You are here live with us. We are on Facebook Live and also on our conference call with Dr. Rose, and we are talking about the tragedy that has happened over the last couple of weeks and just how it's impacting us. Post-traumatic stress disorder is very real, and a lot of us are feeling things and we don't know why, or we think it's unnatural, and I think that we just have to acknowledge it. So today we're having that discussion, how it impacts us. We've really heard a lot of really good things today. I thought what was really interesting, Dr. Rose, is when you talked about the acute stress disorder, it creates that feeling of fight, flee, or freeze, which can impact how you respond in an incident if you're with a police officer. But it also impacts us for those who have not had those interactions, because we've been exposed to these different images. There's been so much said today. Dawn, I love how you brought up the fact that you have, I as well, have felt some things about the privilege that others have. But Jennifer O'Brien just reminded me, because I said a few minutes ago that my husband and I were having conversations with our children, and I said there's a white family behind me, and I thought they don't have to have this conversation. And she reminded me that actually some white families are having this conversation because they have biracial children, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that is, and we do know that those biracial children, a lot of times by police officers, are seen as men of color as well. And so, yes, so Jennifer, thank you for bringing that to my attention, because you're absolutely right. There are families that are having those conversations as well. Dr. Rose, there is so much to get to, and we're already out of time. We're going to do one thing. We're going to continue. But, Lynette, I want you to open up the lines. We're in what we call our after call for those of you who are new to our call. And the after call is where if you're in the conference call, you can speak live back to us. That means you can ask a question or make a comment. This is a big topic, so what I would like to say is, A, when she opens up the line, if you hit *6, that will unmute your line, and we will be able to see you and be able to ask that you go ahead and ask your question. I'm going to ask that we keep the conversation focused. Yes, we all have a lot of feelings about it. Yes, we may disagree with what happened. Yes, we may have solutions for the world, but today's conversation is how we're being impacted. I think it's important that we say how we feel. I love the story about the woman in the supermarket who had a reaction. I mean, we don't have enough time to tell you all the things that I've been feeling and the conversations my husband and I have been talking about. So I'm going to ask you to pause for a second, Dr. Rose. I would love for you to come back if you're able. We will post in our Facebook group all your things so people can follow you and tag you because I know you have your own call. Michelle Washington has a question. And then after Michelle Washington's question, Dr. Rose, I'd like for you to address, what you think we can do for ourselves as we're feeling these things. You did say one thing about reducing the amount of exposure that we have. And then I think part 2, I'd love to have another discussion about the conversations we're having with our kids and how it's impacting our kids. If you're okay with that, Dr. Rose, I'm gonna send this over to Michelle Washington. Michelle?
Okay, sure.
Hey, Jill, I'm driving, so just in case I drop out, please take over. But Dr. Rose, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and the way that you are addressing this with us is excellent. My question, and actually you was just speaking to it because this is such a national tragedy, but I know that we need to do something within our community, not just Delaware, Chester, and Kentucky, but in our community, the people that we touch. And how can we do, what should we do? Not just the conversations, but what is it that we can do to make the difference with the people that we touch every day? And if we see someone that is having issues or challenges with handling these type of things, what can we offer to those individuals?
People that you see, I'll address that last question first, that are having difficulty and challenges and things of that sort. You get them help. You refer them. They're community mental health agencies. So even people who may not have the insurance or the resources to reach out to private practice psychologists or what have you, there's help out there. There's definitely, because as I mentioned before, a lot of the individuals that you will see that will struggle more than others are struggling more than others because it's awakening other traumas that they've had in their lives that they may not have dealt with. And there's a lot of people out here who have had traumatic things happen to them that they have never told a soul, they've never received help for, that continues to impact their lives or they stuff down. And you have things like this happen, and it can exacerbate what we are experiencing because it's compounded the past traumas that they've had in their lives.
Yeah. Dr. Rose, I like the suggestion you made about getting involved. You said you went to go march, and I have a caller on Facebook Live who said that her son went to St. Louis and he marched. And even though some may not feel like that is a solution, I mean, and this is a separate call, but marches have a place in the strategy. It's not the only thing to do, right, but it is a place in the strategy. But you said it gave you the sense of doing something. And so I love that suggestion, and that's one thing I think some of our callers can take away today is, if you're experiencing something, do something. Dr. Rose, I'm going to be honest with you. This is a way for me to do something, right, to share with the world that, acknowledge your feelings, because this is part of it, to begin to process those feelings and do something. There's also a lot of Facebook postings around the economic protests that we should all participate in, right? I mean, there's something that we all can do. So Dr. Rose, take us there. What can we do now? We've acknowledged that we are experiencing a acute stress disorder. We're acknowledging when we have these feelings. What are some things we can do as we wrap up today?
Okay, things that we can do, and keep in mind, I'm a psychologist, so I'm coming to you guys from an emotional standpoint. If you're feeling a sense of outrage, like a lot of us are, a sense of pain, hurt, and just total disregard that these events will have us feeling, we have to also check ourselves. I did a call to action after a call to action last week, and I think it received probably about 10,000 already, like, views and such on Facebook Live. And it was a call to action out to my non-Black friends, followers, or what have you, to speak up, because in order for us to elicit any type of change in this country, for these things to stop happening, any major shift in our sense of freedom and equality that's happened in this country, it has not just been on our accord that we have made these things happen. It has been our non-Black counterparts joining in with us. So that was the first call to action I did. Then I piggybacked that the next day on Friday with a second call to action, and that was to our people. That was to the people of color out there. And that call to action was to really do a self-evaluation of yourself, to check yourself and make sure that, because, first of all, we have every right, I don't want to minimize that, to be angry about all the atrocities that's been enacted upon people who look like us. But we have to know this: if we are not being personally and individually a beacon of love, support, and safety in our own home, if we are emotionally unhealthy, if we are terrorizing and breaking down the people we claim to love, it's quite hypocritical for us to express outrage toward people who never claimed to love us in the first place. We can't go out there and profess that Black lives matter if the lives within your home aren't matter. If you're minimizing your children. I had read something yesterday where she said she was in a store and she heard a Black mother telling her son, "Oh my God, your hair's so nappy, comb that nappy hair." And then the father said, "Yeah, it's always so nappy." Just really breaking down just our own sense of well-being by the things that we say or the things that we do, or not being nurturing to the people in our homes and our communities. There's a quote that says, if there's no enemy within, the enemy outside can do no harm. And I altered that a bit by saying, until you deal with your personal demons, until you deal with your emotional, just lack of emotional health, you will continue to contribute to this world's collective chaos. This conditioning that has gone on for 400 plus years of demeaning us, of minimizing us, it's not just conditioning to the oppressor that sees us as less than. A lot of us see us as less than. They see if your hair isn't a certain way, then you're less than. We have to start challenging all of those negative conditioning patterns that have really found a place in our psyche that we don't realize, that's keeping ourselves down on an individual basis. And when we start to really exercise that and get that stuff up to the surface and out of us that's unhealthy, until we do that, until we become emotionally whole and strong and get rid of all of those just negative belief systems and challenging what we have held true for us that keeps us down for so long, we are not going to be strong enough as a people to combat what's happening around us.
Wow.
Excellent. I love that. So Dr. Rose is giving us a challenge. She's like, look in the mirror, right? Self-evaluate. So, folks, you've joined Momentum Monday. We are here. We have been out of time, but this discussion is so rich. If you're just joining us, we're talking about post-traumatic stress disorder, how this all has impacted us psychologically. Even if you were not there on the scene, you have been a witness to a tragedy, not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, multiple times. You have been a witness to sometimes the live murder of an African-American male. And if you're white or Black, you have been impacted by that. So today, that's what we're talking about, how it's psychologically impacting us all. And we're going to have a special call where we'll talk about how it impacts our children. Dr. Rose, you've been raising amazing folks. We have Dr. Rose on the line. Her work is seen all over the country. She was also featured on the Oprah Winfrey Show, and she is honoring us with her time this morning to educate us on this amazing topic. Lynette, can we open up the lines and see if we have anybody who'd like to speak with us before we go?
Yes. 1 second.
All right, so for those of you who are new to our call, what this means is you have an opportunity to share a question or a comment. So hit *6. It will unmute your line. I think we have a Jay Gray Hill, a 313 that is unmuted.
Yes, hi. Good morning. I'm trying to, I see the marches and I understand that has its place, but I don't really see the impact for change, and I wanted to know if if possible, I don't mind taking part in maybe a boycott of major, like a Walmart, or, hit them where, because money seems to make people understand. And so I want to make a move, or I want a movement to make a change, because we can march for months and day after day, but it just looks like we're just out there holding up traffic.
Well, so and as I mentioned, the march, and I agree with you. The march for me, and I think for most people, as I mentioned, was a way of just feeling like some unity and collectiveness, and to kind of burn off this steam, which we did, because we marched, we walked about 3-4 miles for real, but to burn off that steam of just all this built up just aggression and rage that the events happened. But I don't know if you're obviously on social media. I'm going to assume if you're on the call, but there's been a lot of things floating around. If you haven't seen it, I've received numerous text messages. They're trying to keep it under wraps. This week they're boycotting Target. I wish they don't want to put it on social media for whatever reason. And I wish they could put it on social media, because that's what really gets the word out there. But there are groups of people who've already started organizing each week, targeting different retailers to not spend any money there, to make your voice be heard economically, because I totally agree with you. That's where the change comes, because we know that the money is where the power is. The money's where, and we hold a lot of that. And I don't know why they're not advertising this. They want to do it by a text message, but I feel it needs to be advertised on social media, because there are people who have already started to organize. I think even there was, if I'm reading, I received another text saying, on a particular day this week, not to frequent any fast food restaurants. I mean, but it has to be a collective effort, because there's so many scattered things going on. Yeah. And that's where we fall short. Honestly, that's where we fall short. Because
I want you to address this with the caller, and thank you so much for chiming in this morning. So today's call, as we talk about the acute stress disorder, right, psychologically, how we're being impacted, I agree that, some people feel like the marches don't really have a place. They don't change anything. But I think from a psychological standpoint, as we are trying to get ourselves to a healthy place to deal with the tragedies that we have been a witness to, it makes you feel like you are doing something. It allows you to express in a positive, structured way, and you get that sense of community and unity that we all long for at this time. And so I think that's the reason why I feel like marches and protests, the marches have their place. Now, when we look back in the day, and this is not this discussion, but the marches were really to bring attention to an issue, right? It was to give a voice so that the larger, broader country could hear us. That is, I think, one of the purposes and platforms for a march. Now, is it going to change a law? Well, not by itself, but it could bring attention. So I do think there's a place for it, but that can't be the only thing that we do. I agree with you. We can't stop there, or we won't see change. So I agree from that perspective. But when we talk about how we're being impacted, I do think there, like Dr. Rose said, it does give us a sense of doing something.
Yeah. And it wards off this sense of learned helplessness. It's a disorder. A lot of people have given up, and that's where learned helplessness comes in. When you feel like it's nothing I can do, so why even try? So the fact that people, as tired as I was on Friday evening, I still decided to drive downtown. My son, who had worked until 8 o'clock that night, decided to drive downtown. It wards off that sense of just nothingness. In the moment, we can't. In Friday, in that moment, we could not have impacted the change we want to ultimately see. But being around others who felt the same way we did provided something, even on a spiritual level, that helped us get through the weekend.
Very good, very good. Folks, you're here live on Momentum Monday. We still have people that are popping on Facebook Live. We have people actually just dialing into our conference call. We're here with Dr. Rose. Her work has been featured everywhere. She is a psychologist. She's an expert, and she's helping us talk through how we have been psychologically impacted, and the name that we're all familiar with is the post-traumatic stress disorder. So thank you so much.
Hey, Jill.
Yes.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just want to let the caller know who asked. I sent her a text message of that protest, the text. So I did have that, Rose, and I saw her number on the dashboard. So I went ahead and forwarded that to her. And Bishop had a comment as well. I just want to, I saw his hand up.
Okay, yeah. Do we have anybody else on the line, any other callers unmuted before we go to Bishop? I just want to make sure we get our callers in.
I don't see anyone else unmuted.
Okay, awesome. Go ahead, Bishop. Bishop?
I'm sorry, I was coming off of mute. The comment I want to make is that I hear a broad range of issues that are definitely associated with this topic that have been raised, and perhaps they warrant a separate call of their own. In other words, potential solutions to the madness that's going on in the nation. That's a call all by itself, and I think we would disrespect the topic if we tried to address it in just a segment of this call. But at the same time, I do believe that it's incumbent upon any of us who are either looked upon as community leaders or who fancy ourselves as such to consider potential strategies above and beyond the marches. Marches have their place, as it's been said, but what can be done on a collective basis to bring not only attention to the issue, but resolution to it. And one of the things I'm going to say is that this is highlighting why we must vote in this election that is coming up. A lot of people, out of frustration or apathy, are saying, I'm not going to vote for anybody because none of the candidates are worthy. I can say this. There are some candidates that will be worse than others if they make it into office. So to not vote is a vote in and of itself, and it's a vote against ourselves. So we need to participate in the process that is in place at this point, and then create new processes going forward. So I'm just saying that I pray to God that people will not choose to act apathetically because they feel apathy.
Yeah. Bishop, that was so powerful what you just said. I'm so glad you shared that, because it does come down to we're talking about what can we do. And to do nothing is actually doing something. Like you said, not voting is actually a vote against us. So we have to get involved if we want to see change. And, Bishop, you're right. That is a separate call by itself. So what we will do is we will have another discussion that is about I do want to get into, how do you properly handle a police stop? There's tons of stuff out there on Facebook about that, but I think it's a great discussion to have. I do want to talk about, Dr. Rose, how do you have that conversation with your kids? And not that people are having it, but how can we make sure we're having it properly? How do you deal with the fear? With my two kids, it's impacting them differently. My daughter, who's 12, she wants to rise up, and she wants us to be part of the solution, and she wants to go march, and she wants us to, boycott certain stores, and she's on that train, right? She wants to go do something. But my 10-year-old boy, he's afraid. Why it's happening? So it's impacting both of them very differently. So I'd love to have a call where we talk about our kids, from the young kids that I have to our grown kids, right, who are out there who are also potential. And then also we need to have a call where we do talk about solutions. What are some things that we can do? The great thing is, Dr. Rose, you pointed out, there's so much out there already. I received 4 text messages last night from people I don't know. So I don't know how I got on the train, but of the silent, boycott and protesting that we're doing with different retail stores. So there's so much to do, but we all can do something. Do I have any co-hosts who are trying to chime in? Because I can't check your messages before we wrap up today.
Joe, I just wanted to say that, for this week, I think I'd like for us to just remember to lead with love. Tragedy has happened, but a lot of it will hinge on our reaction to the, reaction to our actions. And so I just want to make sure that we take a hold of our character as we walk on our jobs and in the stores, and I agree with what Don said earlier, that we don't downplay ourselves and who we are, but be courageous, but conscious, and just remember to lead with love, because a lot of this is being birthed out of hurt and fear. And so I'd like to challenge us, as Momentum Monday champions, just remember to lead with love, and take a hold of this week in that manner.
Absolutely. Dr. Rose, you are amazing. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Oh, thank you guys. Thank you guys. And you can, for those who want to find me, just drrosemoten.com, and I have a Facebook page, Dr. Rose Moten, as well as a group in Full Bloom with Dr. Rose. So I hope this helps you guys. Spread the word. Spread the word. We'll get through this together.
Well, absolutely. I'm going to ask Michelle or Lynette to go ahead. We're going to post your information inside our group so people can also join you and follow you as well. And you know, if you have another Monday where you got about 20, 30 minutes, we would love to have we're going to
absolutely.
Going. So I'll ask Lynette to follow up with you just to check your calendar to see if you're available. But, you know, this has been so awesome and so needed. And it's really helped me. I mean, we have to acknowledge how we're feeling and then, you know, check ourselves. I love what you said. You said you gave 2 call to actions. The first one was speak up. Mm-hmm. Speak up. Share what you feel. And that also goes out to our non-black sisters and brothers, right? Speak up on our behalf. Speak up and share. And the other thing is self-evaluate. I love that you said that. Check yourself. I got to check myself. And
absolutely.
And then move forward. So we are out of time. We are way out of time, folks. I want to thank you guys so much for joining Momentum Monday. Thanks to all of you who joined us Facebook Live. This is something new that we're doing. But our next calls, we will talk about solutions. What can we do physically? We've talked about the emotional piece, the psychological piece today. What can we do moving forward to help be a part of the change that we all want to see? This is a national problem. And then what does that conversation with your children look like, whether they're young or they're adult children? What does that look like? And then what are some things that should be considered when you are stopped? And I've seen so many great examples, Dr. Rose, just recently on Facebook, of people that have actually gotten stopped and how they handled it and the outcomes that came about. And I'll end with this story. I saw this on Facebook. There was a young lady who walked into a store, and there was a white officer and a white clerk. They were talking, and they stopped talking when she walked in. So she could tell they probably were talking about the shooting. And so when she got to the counter and she began to check out, the officer said to her, "How are you doing?" She said, "I'm fine." And he said, "No, how are you really doing?" And she said, "I'm frustrated and I'm scared." And he said to her, "It's tough being both of us right now, isn't it?" And he hugged her and she began to cry. And they had this moment where he was reaching out, acknowledging, you know, and it was a touching story to me because, and then she was saying in that moment, they both were just human. And that's what this is coming down to. Dr. Rose, what do you think about that story?
You know, I read that same story last night, and it tugged my heart as well. It tugged because we want to remember all cops, we know that, are not bad. Lots of them have compassion. The majority of them have a sense of compassion, willing to put their life on the line. But the fact that it was acknowledged, that spoke highly of those officers there. Yeah. And for us, that means a lot. So it meant a lot for me when I put this call to action out, and several of my white friends and colleagues and counterparts reached out to me and say, you know, I'm with you, or I feel you, and, you know, this isn't right, and express their compassion toward us as well. And that's what heals, you know, love heals. And that's what we were put on this earth to do, love, love, love. And until we get back to this just basic fundamental premise of our existence here on earth, we will continue to experience just the opposite of that, which is that fear, which is the hate.
Absolutely. Well, folks, thank you so much for chiming in. We are out of time, but I want to thank you again, Dr. Rose. You are amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
You're
Thanks
awesome.
for the invitation.
And I want to thank all those folks who joined us on the call live and then also live. And we're going to come back and we're going to keep having the discussion that the nation is having because it's important and because it matters and we all matter. So signing off until next week is still Jordan Green with the rest of the crew, Momentum Monday. See you next time. Goodbye, everybody.